What industry secret do you know that most people don't?
The New York Times bestseller list has a lot of people on it who buy massive numbers of their own books.
Apparently, there is a symbol that indicates that while it did make bestseller status, there was a bulk buy, a footnote, if you will, or similar to an asterisk.
Lance Armstrong's charity used to buy his book in bulk to give out at events, so people donated to his charity. The charity used the donations to buy his book. Lance got royalties for the book sale.
That takes ball to pull off.
They must be nut to think no one would find out.
Yep, I work for a company, and our CEO bought us all copies, assembly with company funding, 30K employees at the time. It's a status thing, a tax dodge, and a grift all at the same time. Some of the more radical acolytes carry it from office to office like it's their Quran or AA Big Book.
If you find an extra nugget in your order, it wasn't a mistake. You got a cool employee.
At the local place nearby, an extra handful of fries in the bottom of the bag, or an onion ring or cheese curd added to your fries, is policy rather than mistake. Looking generous with the sides gets them repeat business. Edit after 34 responses. No, it's not a franchise. It's a little one location between the public pool and high school founded in 1968 called JD's Drive-In in Appleton, Wisconsin. No, they aren't underfilling the bags and dumping some of that in the bottom. It's already bigger portions and better fries than Culver's or McDonald's.
During COVID lockdowns, I ordered a late-night dinner from Wendy's. I got the spicy chicken sandwich, and it came with 4 patties stacked on top of each other. It was glorious. Kitchen probably was closing up and didn't want to waste the patties, so win for me.
Worked with a lot of banks and their IT systems. You wouldn't believe how old and fragile they are. It's a wonder it's not all coming crashing down.
The entire international banking system runs on COBOL, a language from the dawn of computing, and is basically impossible to ever replace.
As I've previously said, bank software was developed by a 90-year-old shaman under the effect of cocaine. Now only 3 to 4 elected apprentices can interpret the outcome of that black box that they don't know jack shit about. The cocaine shaman is still doing pretty well at 130 years old, but he only talks in lines from the original The Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 2. Can confirm, worked with the shaman on one project. He was a 73-year-old dude. Everyone in the office had to wear a dress shirt and nice pants as a dress code, but he was allowed to wear Crocs and shorts. Dude had the entire IT structure of the company in his head. Zero paper documentation.
I'm an academic researcher, and I can speak for a huge number in my field when I say, if you want access to our studies and they're behind a paywall, you can email us, and we will send you the study. We are genuinely delighted to share, and if you want further context for the results or what have you, I'll always try my best to oblige. The only limiters on that last bit is that the original data for the study might have reached the end of our right to keep it, in which case it will have been destroyed. I might have forgotten details, or I might have written that paper during a particularly hectic time, and my file system might be total shit. Also, a lot of us are on ResearchGate and various social media things, so you can contact us through there. If you can't contact us directly, or we're being slow, one of the other authors on the paper might be contactable.
I've always had a great response when reaching out. I think it's amazing how helpful everyone is.
Information is useless unless it's shared. Also, in academia, our audience is so niche most of the time that it's a really nice feeling when people are interested.
Trained artist here. Most oil paints are made with very toxic substances, as are most paint thinners and mediums. Every single one of my teachers was either very sick, cancer, Meniere's disease, or a bit crazy, eating chalk, licking palettes. All incredible artists I was privileged to learn from. One lesson I learned very well. I wear gloves and sometimes a mask when I paint. Edit. I mentioned Meniere's because one of my favorite teachers had it. I worked closely with him, and his suffering holds a large place in my memories of school. While I think the exposure to toxins didn't do him any favors, I should not have implied a correlation. I apologize. To those asking, no paint was licked off palettes. They had just been cleaned with denatured alcohol, and he always led with, "Now you could eat off them," before waggling his tongue on the glass. Loved the shock factor that guy did.
As a chemist and hobby artist, your post is my favorite. Lots of things, including paints, are not harmful when you work with them once, but when you work with them for years on end, the exposure can absolutely cause chronic issues. Good on you for wearing your personal protective equipment.
This is very true for my past career as well. Hairdressing. Years of exposure to chemicals from dye and bleach gave me intense health problems. They don't tell you that in school.
I have incurable leukemia and started up a few years ago with oil paints. Love when people go in with their fingers, but there's no way I'm going onto my paintings without a glove. I really should be wearing a mask. Thanks for the reminder. There's a reason Bob Ross died from cancer. All those aerosolized paint thinners and mediums he flung around definitely contributed.
If you have already Googled your problem, you have already exceeded the first 2 tiers of tech support.
Last time I had to contact IT, I gave them a list. Edit 1.0. Forgotten context, not verbatim. No devices are currently able to access the internet via the guest Wi-Fi. This is happening to Windows, Android, and iOS, including old connected devices and new. I've turned Wi-Fi on the devices off and on. I've turned the devices off and on. I've forgotten and relearned the network. I've taken every step on Google that I have the security authorization to take. Them. Did you try restarting? Edit 1.1. Because I forgot to mention the first time around, asking if I'd restarted after I told them wouldn't have made me bang my head off the desk quite as hard as I did if I hadn't also told them that the problem wasn't limited to just a single device. Edit 2. The problem wasn't on our. I was working as a spokesperson for the outside crew. End. Short story long, I was trying to get PC help, IT, to remotely restart our router, as the server room is under lock and key, rightly, and we can't do anything without authorization. After actually talking directly to me instead of through a management interpreter, they did, but it didn't solve our issue. PC help had to escalate the ticket to networking. Networking found a problem. I wasn't given more detail than that, and got us limping again. Now they're working on a plan to upgrade the entire mesh network at our site, so maybe it was more than just a little problem.
I'm a casino manager. It is definitely possible, more likely than you think, to win money in the short term. For example, if you walk in, bet on red-black on roulette, it's reasonably close to 50-50. Not quite because of zero. You might do this once. Double your money and leave. Congratulations. You will always lose in the long term. Always. Anyone that thinks they have some kind of system is a sucker. A game would not make it into the casino floor if the maths have not been rigorously checked and long-term simulations run to confirm. Exception to this is poker. The casino will always have a rake or time charge to make their money, but there is no reason you cannot consistently win money if you are skilled enough.
As an ex-poker pro, the way I described it was, yes, the house always wins, but in poker, I'm not playing the house. I'm playing the other people at my table. We're all just paying the house a few to use their table, their dealer, their chips, their security, and their floor space. If I can take enough from the other people at the table to cover that, I make money. That being said, it's very easy to underestimate how much better than the other players you have to be to actually make money at a low-stakes game, where the rake is usually massive in comparison to pot sizes. I'd also add blackjack to this list in your shoes, if I'm being fully honest, depending on the rules and how cards are shuffled at your particular casino. In my gambling days, the few card counters I knew who were actually good at it made serious bank.
A professional poker player told me he goes to the amateur tables to win the entry fee for the pro table. So if you think you're going to go play with noobs, think again.
Worked in online community management and social media for years. Admins can read all of your personal messages. Private only means private from the masses, not from administration. We had to be able to read them to check reports of abuse, grooming, illegal activity, etc. I can't tell you how much cringeworthy shit I had to read through, especially from guys trying to hook up.
Anything you post online can and will be used against you to moderate and advertise, or just plain sell.
The reason why the kid fell off the Orlando free fall ride. Any ride with an over-the-shoulder restraint system works by using a proximity sensor to let the computer system know where the restraint is locked. The ride can't move unless all the sensors sense the correct metal at the correct position. On some rides, you can move the sensor a few millimeters for proper alignment, not enough to make a difference. On the free fall ride, someone in management might have wanted to modify a few seats for larger guests. Someone might have told a maintenance worker to move the sensor, which allowed the ride to start with the restraint in a position not in the original design. With this modification, the restraint would be at more of a 45 or so degree angle instead of directly downward. This may or may not have been done with an engineer's approval. This may or may not have been done with the ride vendor's permission. Any procedure like this is strictly prohibited from any standpoint in the amusement rides industry. I can't explain why they thought it was okay. In most situations, you wouldn't be able to move the sensor much without detaching the bracket and moving the whole thing to a different location. Again, this wouldn't even be discussed anywhere I have ever worked, but they might have at Icon Park. The details of this mechanical procedure never made the headlines in Florida because all the lawsuits were settled. In the end, someone decided to change the position of that sensor. We will probably never know who. There is probably a maintenance worker who was ordered to do so. I've worked on enough restraints to know that it was not an accident. Personally, I would have refused to do it, and so would almost everyone that works on these things.
If your baby goes to a nursery daycare, chances are those weren't their first steps, words, etc. that you witnessed. Industry standard is to not tell parents when these things happen, as it makes them feel bad. I've seen kids up and walking about the room for weeks, even months, before their parents proudly announced at drop-off that they took their first steps last night.
When my daughter was in daycare, for a couple weeks, they kept saying, "She is so close to walking, and we can't wait to hear she took her first steps." She was toddling all over at daycare, but not at home.
It's funny, even at a super early age, they develop a sort of at-home personality and a separate one for when they're out in the world doing their day-to-day business. We see loads of stuff that parents are really surprised at. Some actually full-on don't believe you and get really pissy when you tell them stuff. I suppose that's where the whole thing probably originated, and why it became industry standard.
The news about Boeing is not a surprise to me at all. The amount of resources that they are able to delegate in an effort to deter whistleblowers is unfathomable to the average American EU citizen.
Literally didn't bolt the panel back in. It takes an impressive amount of incompetence to let something like that slip by.
It takes laying off thousands of quality control inspectors, which the union has suggested might be a good policy to reverse right about now.
This is what happens when a company gets ran by MBAs instead of engineers. I say this as somebody who has an MBA myself, lol.
I worked in politics. There are a lot of people who write to a politician like they're a celebrity. They receive love letters and all kinds of weird stuff. There's also quite a sizable part of their mail that is comprised of people asking for a photo with an autograph, way more than you think. Some because they're admirers, others because they collect them, and then some other cases you don't really want to know about. I've worked for a female politician. Trust me, you don't want to know. The dirty little secret within the secret is that the politicians I knew didn't sign anything. They had a machine that did all the signing for them. So technically, the autographs were not even real.
We used to have a local politician who was a really bad person, or at least a really selfish one. I could never understand how she didn't realize how awful she was, especially after a pretty large scandal she was involved in. Then one day I ran into her at a gas station and one of her fans walked up. It was at that moment that I realized that even during the worst press coverage and scandal, they are still constantly complimented by people who are starstruck. That would go to a lot people's heads. If you're nice to hotel staff, they are more likely to give you free shit.
A good friend of mine, Korean, visited Las Vegas for her honeymoon. The husband was just a student at the time, and she worked at a call center to pay their bills. When they were checking in at the hotel, the man at the front desk asked where they were from. She told them, "We are from Korea." And the man responded, "Oh, I love Korean food." They were a bit early to check in, so they left their bags and went out to get some food at a local Korean restaurant. When they came back, they bought some food for the front desk guy, and when they handed the food over, the guy was shocked and upgraded them to the penthouse. Little did my kind friends know, the guy was a manager, and the penthouse was available. Friend sent me pics after they got in their room, and wow, Las Vegas penthouse is probably a room I will never be able to afford in my lifetime. All for a little Korean food. They got a memory they will never forget.
I got a room upgrade for Honey Crisp apples. I had a case of them sent from my friend's farm in New York, and then my plans abruptly changed. I was going back to New York, so I didn't need tons of premium apples. I was in the South, and the desk clerk recognized the variety and asked where I got them because they're so hard to come by there. This was many years ago. I took a couple for myself and gave him the rest. He said he was going to share them with all the staff. As a poor young person who was rich in apples, it felt really good to share the wealth.
I make wildlife films for big streamers and broadcasters. The sound is all either library or Foley.
I understand it because people are gullible and it adds to the experience, resulting in the monies, but man, hearing an ant lick its chops drives me up a fucking wall.
I always hate the bugs sound effect that is always used in documentaries or movies. Who decided bugs sound like that squishy clickety-clack?
Some appetizers are the most labor-intense items on the menu to make. For example, dumplings takes one worker about an hour to make 12-15 orders. If you want to know where I'm getting at, if a restaurant offers a plethora of appetizers options, then there's a high chance a lot of them are store-bought and resold, because there's no feasible way to prepare several orders for each item on the menu.
On the other hand, at my dinky little Chinese delivery spot that is seemingly no different from all the others, I went in one day to see a giant pile of dumpling meat and 3 women dutifully filling the wrappers.
I work in education. We are way behind the ball with student issues and are just flying by the seat of our pants, so to speak. We are in crisis, and most parents simply want to drop their kids off and hope they have a normal experience. None of this is normal. You need to start having conversations with your kids about mental health and social media. If not, woof, our society is not in good shape.
Children shouldn't have unlimited access to the internet. It was bad enough when my generation had Xbox Live access, but with today's social media, my wife's nephew is an iPad kid raised during the pandemic. He can barely write, barely speaks, and is intensely agoraphobic. It's fucking heartbreaking.
Car industry. Never buy a car that is completely new on the market. They always come with a ton of bugs that need fixing, and it takes about 2 years of serial production to get rid of most of them. If you must buy a new car, be sure the model has been in the market for at least 2 years. The reason for why we don't fix the problems before start of selling: cost. Also, don't buy models that were in development during years of crisis. Example, during the 2008 financial crisis, we let go a huge number of people. To fix the numbers in the books, didn't actually save the company money because they all got a big payout on their way out. So we were understaffed and under immense pressure to reduce cost. The models that came on the market after that time were shit, like serious shit quality we have never seen before.